I did find you through YouTube. The first video of yours I saw was the Are Giants Old Gods
Oh, okay.
um video, which I thought was impressive. I thought it was a very interesting analysis, and I had never previously had thought of it like that.
Most people don't. It's a bit like fairies. So if you talk to people about fairies, most people think fairies are little Tinkerbell type creatures, small and delicate and little wings. But fairies are just any creature from fairyland. So it's like a Londoner is someone from London, New Yorker, someone from New York. A fairy is someone from fairyland. And fairyland has giants and trolls, monsters and demons, as well as little pixie-esque fairies with
You know,
magic wands.
the people of the mound,
Hmm.
which are all very interesting. It was a very interesting concept to learn about because it can be anything from a god to whatever the Fomorians were to people previously. Um, because in the Book of Invasions, when we get to so the Tuatha De Danann are the fourth wave of five waves of people that invade Ireland, and we get to the Milesians, which are a group of people that come on in and somehow manage to beat the Tuatha De Danann and the Tuatha De Danann. At then that point, jump into fairyland and become fairies.
Okay, just trying to recall the story. But when the two thirty on beaten, I can't remember. I mean, I remember the two thirty on and the Favorians. Part, but okay, that's interesting because there is talking. What is fairyland? Is it the other world? Is it something else? And is the other world the same as the underworld? Is another discussion that's had, and it can be quite ambiguous.
Yeah, because at first I started thinking it was when I first saw it, I thought it was similar to what in Shinto Japan they call the kami,
Hmm.
which is what they just classify as either something metaphysical or supernatural in nature, um, which could be anything from spirits or gods. They said this broad term for it, and I almost thought that that's what they were talking about. But I mean, trying to read the myths directly is probably one of the most supremely confusing things to do, unless you're
Yes.
a trained academic. Um, but T.W. Rolston, this one,
Hmm. Yes, I think I may
um,
actually have that. I was just looking for that on my shelf. Yes.
he
Yeah.
he gives he doesn't go into the fine details. He's just talking about the overall ideas to what's happening in the myths, and he talks about how um, Tuath, Danann are defeated, and then they go through the what he described as the invisible veil between fairyland and here.
Mhm.
And I can't quite tell, even then, when he's describing it, is it the underworld or the other world?
That's it. Yeah, because they could be the same. It's more otherworldly, I would say. I mean, it depends on because there's some aspects of it because the other world is a topsy turvy world, I guess you would call it, where rivers flow uphill and uh, night turns in. Well, night does turn into day, but yeah, but as an order of things, night comes before day. It's a world where you don't get hungry, a world where you can't tell the time because time, 1 hour there is 10 years here. Um, and it was considered a world of absolutely well. It seems like it's a world of opposites, but it's also a world of absolutely nothing. So in some descriptions, it feels like it's a world of opposites because people don't get hungry and people don't get cold, but people don't get warm and don't get full up with food, and people don't get tired, but people still would fall asleep. Um, and that's it. So it's just so if you really look at it and really analyze it, it feels like it's a world of nothing. But if you try to explain nothing, you can't. So all you can do is explain it in our physical terms. You can't just say they went to the fairy world and there was nothing there. You explain it as the opposite to something. I'm just trying to think who wrote a great piece about this. Um, no, I can't remember. It may have been Bruce Lincoln wrote a part about it in his book on death, war, and sacrifice. I remember. But yes, it's a really interesting concept. And what is interesting is that most, certainly from my understanding, the Indo-European cultures themselves all have that land in them. And yeah, there are certain aspects of the land that always come up, like it's far to the east and down to the south. Some said it was as far away as the other side of India because that's as far as we had really explored. Um,
Yeah.
and so it was like a physical place you could never get to, but because it's physical, you could theoretically get to it, but no one had ever managed to go to it apart from myth and legend.
Yeah.
But yes, it's
No.
and it's an interesting concept of a place.
That is an interesting concept of a place. Um, yeah, because I mean, because when I had Sally North on to talk about what on Irish, Celtic Irish, uh, she was ta also talking about who or what are the fairies, and she was
Hmm.
talking about they're people like us, but they live invisibly alongside us.
Oh, a different plane. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's yes. So there is sort of some feeling like that, certainly with the underworld, and that would work with fairies. And that is why crossroads and nights with full moons, those dimensions overlap. And that's where those people and or locations where you'd find fairies or whatever.
yeah,
And then you find that some animals can naturally pass between those realms. And
yeah,
the animals that do that are animals like ravens and dogs. And that's why you get sort of the dogs of death and ravens turn up at funeral rites because they were the animals that could eat your body, your dead body, and then take it to the underworld. They were like a courier service, like FedEx or whatever. They would pick up your body and take it to the
FedEx
underworld.
death.
Then FedEx stuff, yes. Yeah, weird analogy, but yes, it's yeah, that's what that's all about. It's really yeah, an interesting idea, and that in theory the dogs were men, and so what would happen is as they pass through the plane, they turn inside out. So with inside a dog, there is a man sort of inside out, and then when the dog goes to the other world, it would turn it back out into a man, and look like a person.
Okay.
There's some stuff like that, but there's some really interesting folklore around that, or myth, certainly in Ireland, where uh, they don't want the dog to take the soul. When I think this must be post Christianity myself, but it may be older because there you see talk of people not wanting when someone dies the dog to take them because the dog would take them perhaps to the underworld. So that you see the myth starting to change, and they want that person to go somewhere nicer. And so what they do is when someone's about to die, they leave a bowl of nice food, dog food, or like by the fire. I think it's by the chimney or by the door. So when someone dies, the dog will get distracted, and that gives them time to take the body away and deal with it properly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that explains why all the royals were trying to bribe their way through the afterlife and
Oh, always, yes,
The
that's one.
book of the book of the book of, and the book of the dead, the Egyptian book of the dead.
Always, yes, that's been a one of the best business decisions by religion ever. Religion had a good, business idea, but the fact that you can allow people to pay you to have some essence of your body in, in sight of the gods all the time, so it looks like you're worshiping them all the time, so you have more chance to go to. And then that don't they weigh you? I think it's the Egyptians which weigh your heart against a feather.
Yeah. Well, that's before your heart gets weighed
Yeah, yeah.
against the
Oh,
fire.
right before. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So as part of that process, once he lets you know how miserable you've been in your life, you then know that, well, what's no point weighing it off, just take me away. So,
I wonder if like he ever gave up halfway through the list. Be like, can we just feed him already? Can we just throw
yeah,
him?
use ChatGPT to make it. Could you please abbreviate this to a 1 minute conversation?
All right. Well,
Just coffee.
anyway,
Yes.
we'll get back to the myths and the
Get back. Yes.
legends.
Yes, yes. Let's go back to sort of on topic, which we never do, but let's
We never do, but we got something on topic.
mhm.
We can be a little more on topic for a short period of time. So we could talk about um, this time of year. One thing I was interested in. You got any legends, myths for me, John?
This
Anything
time of year.
grounding?
So at the end of the year, so around Yule and the solstice. I mean, the solstice is the interesting thing.
Yeah.
So many there's much talk on the winter solstice and what it means and doesn't mean. Is it a time when we did our ancestral veneration? Remembered dead? Is it a time when we said goodbye to the year and hello to the new year? How aware are we of it? I mean, is it the time of year that New Grange, for example, in Ireland, was built to um, represent that Stonehenge was? Because it was, 20 years ago, but he thought it was summer solstice. And literally in the space of a generation, everybody now thinks it's winter solstice. So why is that? And I actually think that's probably true. Winter solstice is probably was the most spiritual or night of most ritual behavior because it was a long, dark night. And so they felt you were closest to the underworld, closest to the other world because the night was so dark. And therefore you were closest to your ancestors. So there's some myths about that. And then, eventually with time, you get people turning up like Father Christmas, whoever he is. And some people believe he has some relationship with Odin. Some in Eastern Europe believe he's more related to Perkinus, who was the storm god, who's related to Thor and the like. Um, and obviously there's St. Nicholas, the I think it was Turkish St. Nicholas, who stories about that. And then why was Jesus born on Christmas, which a lot of people get wrong. They think that was a direct hit to um, remove some significance from Saturnalia and other events going on at the time. Primarily that Jesus was conceived on the day he died. So the old belief system was that you die on the day you were conceived. So if Jesus was conceived in Easter, it worked out that he was actually therefore born on Christmas Day, as we call it today.
Yeah. So, yeah. The best I found was an interesting hot mix. One was the medieval period. Saturnalia was a legitimate problem. Like people were killing each other.
Okay.
Um, don't really know exactly. I mean, it's the medieval period, so people would come up with any excuse to kill each other.
By medieval, are you talking, sort of 1000
To 1400
AD,
or
1400?
15.
Okay, so Saturnalia is still being celebrated 1400.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Where? What, across Europe or
yeah.
in? Okay.
Um, and I think the biggest thing was the Julian to Gregorian calendar switch. because Orthodox Christmas was the original date for Christian Christmas.
It was, but that was based on Easter being 6th of April. Um, and they changed. Was it 6th of April? I think it was 6th of April. Yeah, and say that changed back when the Roman Catholic Church came in and made the Georgian calendar or the Julian calendar, sorry, and yeah, and so but the Orthodox remained there. So again, but I don't. But is that just coincidence, or do you think they fiddled the calendar such to take 6 days away from Christmas as opposed to? And what else could they do? They could have left Christmas on the 6th of January and lost 6 days somewhere else. I don't know. How would you do? Yes. I don't know. Yeah, I haven't really thought about the implications of how do you reset the calendar, and did they do it deliberately to alter dates like that?
Yeah, that's the interesting can of worms. That is a very interesting can of worms because do you know when they switched to the calendars?
I thought that was in the 1400s. I may be wrong. I'm
1400?
not. That's not a period of time I'm overly familiar with. I'm sure we can work it out with a little clickety click
A little clickety click.
um, of the
Okay.
older
Yeah.
computer while you
'Cause
are
that would
using it.
definitely be the time period where they would try to capitalize on divorcing from pre-Christian
Hmm.
holidays.
Transition 1582. So it's quite late on.
All right. So late
And oh yeah, and it happened in Italy first. So yeah,
goes full circle. We're talking about the Italians.
Italians, yes. It didn't happen in Britain though till 1752.
Huh. So it'd be pretty late.
So 200 years later,
So
Russia, Greece, Russia and Greece in the 20th century then adopted it. Wow, I didn't know that. Although
okay.
I guess saying that I've just typed into ChatGPT and it may just have hallucinated all of that. So as it
That
does.
could have, yeah, but that could have, all right. So that puts a whole different spin on it.
That's very late. So Saturnalia is still going on in 1582. I would be surprised. It doesn't mean it wasn't happening, but I'd be surprised if it was
I mean,
six, seven. Well,
it was happening, but it wasn't like it didn't look like the
the Roman flavor
holiday.
of the
Yeah,
yes.
the
Okay.
Romans had. So
Hmm.
Saturnalia was happening, but it wasn't like the pagan celebration, the pre-Christian celebration that happened in years previous, cultures previous.
So there's certainly some data would contradict that. So they're saying some data suggests December was already 25th was already being celebrated as Christmas in the first millennium. But I can't understand how that could be.
I don't think that would have happened
It
because,
can't. It doesn't make sense for that to happen. That's a
yeah,
misunderstanding of the data. So yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. That's there must be a book about. I'm sure someone's done a video about it. I mean, I remember did a video about it. And it was all about Easter, and because people were conceived on Easter, but because Christ was conceived on Easter, because that's the day he died, and we know Easter as the actual sort of time, knowing when that was, that makes sense for when Christmas is. But it's interesting to see if Christmas was moved back 12 days deliberately as part of the introduction of the calendaring system. That's very interesting. It's a mystery to solve in 2025.
it will be. We'll do some investigative reporting on it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think yeah, because I think Christmas is a hotter mess than people take it as. I don't think it's as cut and dry in the political sense of trying to Christianize holidays.
Yeah, I mean, because no one celebrated birthdays back then, so it wasn't anything anyone really worried about.
Yeah, because you don't really have the kind of Christmas music, and you don't have that type of Christmas celebration coming in until um,
That's why
till the
Victorian 18th century, I'd say. No, you really
1800s.
started seeing the real Christmas tradition we get today.
Yeah. And that was made mostly through America.
Hmm. There's a
Yes, we
good lot
were
of
a bunch of
influence there.
immigrants with nothing in common. So put all those strange things you brought from your homeland and put it on a
Exactly.
Christmas tree.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, let's find a common date, and people wanted to be more Christian than pagan. So, yeah,
Yeah. Or actually, no, it was celebrated by a number of non-Christian people.
yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. People,
Yeah,
sort
because
of
the
like tradition.
holidays, yeah, because at least for American history, the holidays started popping up um, in the sense of how they are more so because of the Industrial Revolution. Um, because we could make chocolate more and produce perfumes and other fancy things to take at Valentine's. Um, and then Christmas, uh, well, the 1800s, life wasn't exactly the greatest of qualities, so let's try and be nice to people and give things.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So
yeah, but
that'd
that would
be
be,
hard. Yeah, post-industrial revolution. So, did the industrial revolution cause more people to lose jobs because they weren't working, or did it allow more people to be richer?
I think it allowed more people to be richer.
Okay.
Um, like it was a double-edged sword. Like now we can get like everybody across the board could start getting some more luxury.
Hmm.
Um, because
If
nowadays,
they were working.
yeah, because nowadays, weirdos with funny blazers can walk into any department store and probably buy it on discount at a clearance rack and look like they're worth a lot more money than they really are.
Hmm.
And people can capitalize off of that.
Yeah, yeah. That's yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. Yeah, because they always the movement of wealth always is an interesting influence in the world. Because if you quickly whiz back to the American Revolution, with the French funded that, obviously, or helped fund that,
They
and
bankrolled that.
the result of that was that France became bankrupt and the French Revolution happened. Yeah,
Two revolutions for the price of one.
well, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So what you reap, you shall sow. Yeah, what you sow, yes, you shall reap. Yes. The,
Well, there was a lot of weeping going on for the revolutions.
yeah.
Yeah, and then because we do actually have Christmas hymns going back 1700 years ago. There's one, and I'll link it.
1700.
And yeah,
Wow.
it's not the kind of Christmas hymn you would picture it to be today.
Okay.
Not at all.
No. Okay. Maybe some of the stories hadn't quite become ingrained, like Jesus being in the manger and all those sort of things. But that's interesting.
Yeah, it's more like Jesus is
Wow.
born and he's going to save everybody from sin. But
Okay, but you could regard it as a Christmas song.
yeah, it's
Okay.
definitely a Christmas song.
Unlike Jingle Bells, which is not a Christmas song. But it isn't.
That's
It
better
doesn't
if they were
doesn't.
singing Jingle Bell 1700 years ago.
No, they weren't. But just for the record, Jingle Bells has no mention of Christmas in it.
I know,
It
that's not really a Christmas song. It's
isn't. Yeah, I'm
about
just saying. Yeah.
riding,
Riding through the snow
taking
on
a
a one
sleigh
horse
ride.
open sleigh. Yes. It's about winter rather than Christmas.
Yeah,
We have to be, in this day and age with all these things going on, you have to be quite specific. Yeah. Like, is Die Hard a Christmas film?
it is.
And if it is, then uh, The Princess Bride is also a Christmas film because the story is told at Christmas time.
Good,
So
good.
just there you go. So yeah, things we associate with Christmas.
Yeah.
But a 1700-year-old song. Yes, I'll be looking. I'll look forward to that. If you're going to post it on here, like on the video,
Yes, I mean, technically, we do have one that's 1,700 years old. It's not at all the kind of Christmas hymns that people would even enjoy. It, like a lot of music that goes back 1,700 years
yeah,
ago.
exactly. Yes,
It's
yes, the
very
standard.
dry.
Yes, standard sort of Christian church in England. The dull organ. No, 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 no. Nobody drolls along to a tune. Yes, yes. Oh, well, yeah, they wonder why no one's turning up to church. Yes,
Yeah,
yeah, the
it needs
hits
to
of the
get jazzed
1700s
up.
don't do it. Yeah, it does.
I personally think that church needs to spice things up, like Alfonso the Tenth's Santa Maria.
We see in America quite a lot these modern churches. Yeah, whether they're actually churches or not, or just schemes to get money, I don't know. But you hear
If it's
different things.
Baptist, Methodist, or evangelical, it is a scam. It is a
Uh,
scam or a
oh, okay,
non-denomination. That's how you definitely know it's a scam.
non-denomination. Okay, yes, but they tend to have more happy tunes, more, yeah, more toe tapping ditties going on for the music.
Toe tapping ditties. All right.
Toe tapping ditty. Yes, that's what we
I
need.
will I will make sure to use that very British term. Yeah. So so we have it 1,700 years. Um, which is funny because that was during the time of Saint Nicholas.
Hmm.
I don't think he would have intentionally made made that or maybe even used that hymn. But it's
No, I
funny
wouldn't have
that
thought so.
happened.
He was, from what I understood, he was like Robin Hood in a way. You know, he just gave gifts to the poor. I
Yeah.
don't know where he got them
He
from.
never stole from the rich. There's a reason he's a saint.
Are you sure he never stole from the rich? There's many saints who may have stolen from the rich. So whoever them,
He
I don't
was
think
rich.
that
He was
looks
born
good.
rich.
So
I'm sticking
yes,
with that. He was
okay,
a rich
okay.
guy and he gave the
Let's not
poor
ask where he got his riches from. Hey,
the death of his parents.
who were slave traders? I don't know. What were they?
Don't
I don't
know. But
know.
he
I'm
uh,
just saying.
he gave money so people would not be sold as slaves.
So he brought his sainthood then. Is that the twist we're putting on
That is the twist. No, he
it?
was very active in helping people.
Hmm.
And he wanted to do that. And it wasn't even just like a gift giving. It was also that he's a little bit of a badass. Like he'd go fight pirates and pull swords from
Hmm.
Roman
Well,
executioners. And there's one where he
fantastic.
pulled a Roman executioner's sword who's going to cut off three people's heads.
Wow.
And he punched one of his fellow bishops at the Council of Nicaea for speaking blasphemy.
Wow. Okay. That's a,
All he had to do was repent.
in, well, that's what you do in Christianity anyway, isn't it? Oh,
That person must have not been liked if someone could punch him in the
yes.
face in front of everybody.
Must have been an annoying person. Yes. You hear of those, though. People in power. There
Yeah,
must have been a big transition of the quality of priests in the church at that time.
yeah. And the interesting thing, I've heard this. I can't remember what's her name from the St. Nicholas Foundation. Um, but she said also that he was there at the Council of Nicaea to address corruption within the church, which
Okay.
was extremely unusual for bishops at the time to even try and bring that up. They were pretty corrupt back then.
Yeah. Well,
300 AD, they were
they
super
were.
corrupt.
I was going to say, I think there are still some who may be, um, allegedly, but yes, they must have. It would have been far worse back then with less checks and balances going on.
Yes, this is like American Baptist and
I was going
non-denominational
to say,
church
yes, yeah.
corruption.
When you talk about corruption, that's exactly what I was thinking. There's obviously things going on. Yes, people have those positions of power and use it for a wrong reason. That's
Yeah, definitely.
hmm.
One rich old guy decided he wanted to go address it and punch someone in the face at the Council of Nicaea.
Well, fair play to him. Fair play to him. Yes.
Christmas movie that should get made.
Yeah, the true story of Saint Nick.
Yeah,
Saint Nick the badass.
Nick.
Yes. I'll
Stop
look for that.
it.
Maybe Arnold Schwarzenegger would play him. I don't know. Sylvester Stallone or something.
I will give you money so your daughters don't get sold as prostitutes.
Yes. That's a, that's yes. It's a Christmas gift. Well, it would be a fantastic gift if you didn't have to, yes, do that. But
It would
yes,
be.
a different world, very different world, and we sometimes forget that.
Yeah, back to the solstice conversation.
So, see, sorry, yes. Where do we go? Yes. So, yeah, Father Christmas obviously is one set of myths, and was Odin Father Christmas or Perkinus Father Christmas, or somehow the stories of Father Christmas have been mixed with stories of other gods. I mean, because let's face it, if Father Christmas has the ability to tell you if you've been good or bad, and has the ability to be anywhere he wants on Christmas Day, he is one powerful god.
Yes, yes, that is true.
So, and obviously those attributes came post Saint Nick. Um, so yeah, that's it sounds like yeah, I don't know if those attributes are modern or whether they have come from European tradition, older European traditions from Eastern and Northern Europe. I don't know. It's really hard to tell, and it's always a challenge for studying myth that certainly regarding Eastern Europe, you can't always tell because the people in Eastern Europe are really passionate about their folklore. If you talk to them, and you can't if you say, "Oh, I've got a copy of a piece of folklore here," and it doesn't match their opinion, they think, "Well, that can't be right." Yeah, they're even if it's from a source older than they are, they're very protective of it. So it's really hard because a lot of it wasn't written down till later to understand what was being told before writing came along in those communities. And so it's hard to tell when where those attributes for Father Christmas came from, whether it's a more modern thing or not regarding Perkinus and Odin. And part of that is because of how they look. Yeah, old men with beards, and old men with beards tend to be popular gods, from Zeus to Odin to whoever. So yeah, it's how powerful a god was Father Christmas, and if he's that powerful, should we be worshipping him more than we do?
That is true. Um,
I mean, he's almost godlike, one would say. We've made a father, because who else is to judge if someone's been good or bad?
well, apparently he has the ability to watch you and know when
So all
you're
seeing.
asleep on Christmas night.
So he's got the ability to see anyone whenever he wants. Yeah, that's a strange being there, figure in that, which is what. So he really does have nothing to do with the church, though, does he? He is a completely um, fictional character. We've just applied people like Saint Nick to him, to give him some sort of credibility, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, but he's still well, this is the funniest thing is he really isn't a church figure other than the
No, he
name.
isn't. Hmm.
He can watch anyone at any time. He decides whether or not you're going to get a Christmas present.
Never been good or bad like God.
And he somehow manages to make it to every house in one night.
Indeed. Knows where you live, can make you fall asleep, can watch you all the time. And that is more godlike than God. So yeah, that's very, very interesting how we've created this figure. And yet no one That's an idea. Yeah, well, the church would probably say he's not real, which he isn't, obviously. But it's funny how he's why the church doesn't push back against him as saying he's um, evil or corrupt or blasphemous to have that figure in your life.
That is an interesting thought. That's a
Because
very,
if ever there was a sort of paganism, oh, here's a second god to turn up in society, that Father of Christmas is up there with the number one candidate. He's like, yeah,
wow, that's a, okay. I gotta really think about that one now. Father Christmas, is he corrupt? Should the church should we be afraid of him?
well, he's probably, I would say, amongst non-Christian. Well, he's obviously popular amongst children more so than Jesus and God.
Well, yeah, you gotta behave if you want to
That
be invited
and
to
you've got to
Christmas.
start them young if you're going to get them, hooked to your religion. So
Well,
is
he's
he
not
the
going
god of?
around handing out Bibles.
No, he isn't. Yeah, he's the god of commercialism. He's the god. He's quite corrupt. He just gives you gifts. If you're a kid, you love Father Christmas.
This would be the ideal time to insert either a Hindu priest or a Shinto priest and ask if technically we are creating a god by doing this.
Hmm. Well, Father Christmas is a god. You look at his attributes. They're not the attributes of a spirit, or whatever. They are the attributes of a god.
But do we have anybody that
Odin,
that resembles this in
Odin,
other
Hercules.
religions other than just Father Christmas?
Well, as I say, Odin and Hercules. They have those. They are gods. They have those sort of attributes. They just don't give gifts.
All
They
right.
look the same. They being godlike. They can tell who you are, and
And who
they
is
can go
Perkius?
places.
We haven't talked about him yet on the
Storm
show.
god Hercules. So he is the equivalent of Thor. He's the storm god of the more Eastern European countries, and he had so many attributes similar to Thor. His name turned probably into Fusion, which then turned into probably Thor. And we still use Fusion and Thor in Old Norse stories. And Fusion, I think, it's Thor's son in those stories. So we see some sort of alignment and misalignment or merging of beliefs happening there. So it may be that, I mean, there does seem to be a lot of, I would argue, potentially, it's far more complicated than this. So I'll put a caveat, this is just a video, not an academic paper. But basically, Neolithic farming beliefs going into Scandinavia. And then we see these Indo-European beliefs come along, and it feels like many of the agricultural farming beliefs have remained sort of intact. And we see some of those in aspects of Balder or Freya, in terms of their stories, but also because the god names are all different, not Indo-European. It sounds like they've kept the old god names. So uh, to me, when you see fusion coming to there, but Thor still exists, it could be that Thor is the old um, storm god of the possibly of the agricultural belief, and fusion's coming, or it may be that Thor is maybe an Indo-European god that's been named in a very from a different language and has merged with from another Indo-European source together. I haven't quite worked that out. I'm spending some time this year looking into that a bit more, because I'm going to revisit some Indo-European myth, certainly the foundation myths, and some people use linguistic evidence to challenge that, but they make an assumption that the linguistic evidence is Indo-European rooted, where if some of those gods' roots and some of the stories, such as those of Sutur and the like, who was sort of like the fire god of the beginning of time in Old Norse myth, is actually not Indo-European, then it would be wrong to use that as an Indo-European sort of root. if that makes sense. So it's like there's older stories there that are hanging on and have been merged with Indo-European myth, and so but to compare those that then with another Indo-European myth said it doesn't match would be right because it's not Indo-European. Does that make sense? Um, but basically there's a
So,
mix
so
of cultures.
you're trying to figure out with fusion who
Well,
is.
fusion is the son of Thor, but theoretically, in Old Norse myth, but fusion is also a storm god in his own right in Indo-European myth, other Indo-European myth. So why does the Old Norse, which has Indo-European influence, have Thor, storm god, and fusion, who is now his son? Why do you have sort of two storm god names turning up? And fusion comes from Perkinus, and Thor has the same attributes as Perkinus. So it's like there's like the gods split into two and joined together in like before the Old Norse appeared and joined together somehow.
Was it a
And
result of cultural interaction or was it a
exactly,
result
definitely
of,
cultural interaction. But
yeah,
the question is the cultural interaction between two Indo-European cultures or between maybe a Sami type culture and Indo-European or an agricultural culture? So from the east. So and we see that a lot in Greece and the like um, with the Indo-Europeans. So
okay.
that we see other aspects of myth that could also indicate that. So it's an interesting topic to look at, but it's one I haven't yet put pen to paper on, so I haven't had deep thinking time about it. But there's something there that needs to be uncovered.
Yeah, that is neat.
Mm.
It's also really hard too because I'm trying to think through my Norse myths after not looking at them for almost a year.
So yeah. So if you look at things like Balder, Balder is this almost Christ-like figure, some people would like to say, who gets killed by a piece of mistletoe and he goes to the underworld. Okay. Now, that is not an Indo European myth. That is an agricultural myth. And we see many myths of people going to the underworld,
Mhm.
dying, so good people dying in the agricultural cultures, all across the Near East and Turkey and the Hittites, and even into Greece. Greece has a ton of agricultural myths in it. Even its creation myth is agricultural, not Indo-European. Um, so yes, it's yeah, we see those in there, and and the question is why they persisted in there. And I have different theories about that, but that also means there's some aspects to the Old Norse myths that aren't Indo-European. Are they older agricultural myths we've now lost, or are they semi myths, or are they very ancient Indo-European myths we've never, that have been lost everywhere else and just persist in the extremities of where the Indo-Europeans went,
Yeah,
the very oldest. Um, I want to try and sort of unwrap that at some point.
that would be an interesting analysis because would that mean that there could have been a division which
Could have
created
been
two
a
different
division.
gods?
They could have been waves. You get a wave of people dispersing, and then another wave after. And
Yeah,
we definitely see that in the European because the language changes, and we see certain um, languages talk about a myth in one way, and older languages talk about a myth in a different way. So we see belief changes that are reflected. We know the age difference because it's reflected in different languages. So, Zoroastrians talk about a particular aspect of death in a very different way to uh, the Old Norse, for example. The ferryman of the dead. So the Old Norse have the ferryman of the dead, but in Zoroastrian you have the dog. You have this Cerberus, the equivalent, the dog that sits on the Sinvat bridge, and the Greeks have Cerberus for that, which is where we're talking about the dog of death and passing through from where we started this conversation, the dog that passes from real life to the other world. So we see that split, but we say, but the split also aligns very well with a change in the dialect, the Indo-European dialect. So that's interesting as well. So
Yeah.
lots to uncover in 2025, Garrett, which I will hopefully do.
I believe in you, John. I believe in you.
Yes. If I don't, yes. I've been far too busy this year. I had major plans and didn't do any of them. So next year I've planned to do nothing, which means I'm going to do something and exceed expectations, Garrett.
Good. Good. We need more in-depth Crecganford videos.
Indeed. Well, a book. Hopefully I'll get a book finished next year. That would be a good start.
Okay. The Crecganford book. I look forward to it.
Or myth, yes. Yes. So yeah, looking forward to that. Definitely looking forward to that.
Okay. Okay. So that's neat. Um,
So yes, what else about Christmas? Then apart from that, there's just there's say Father Christmas and the solstice are the biggies, I think, for this time of year. Um, myth wise. Uh,
because we've got a different, I mean, there's a mix. It's interesting because Christmas used to be more like Halloween. Like we'd tell ghost stories and then we'd talk about our ancestors.
yeah, because of the solstice, yeah.
And then there was, yeah, because I have one interview with P.D. Brown on the 13, his book, The 13 Moons, and he said specifically this for some cultures, that used to be Mother's Night when you'd honor the female ancestors.
Yeah, that's Christmas Eve, is the Anglo-Saxon. Just called it the Mother's Night. Um, so, and I don't know where that comes from. I'm going to look into that. It's something I was talking to someone else about actually a couple of weeks ago. Um, why did the Anglo-Saxons call it Mother's Night? And perhaps there is some kind of European or Indo-European belief there. But I'd look into that. Yes, that's interesting though, why it's that night in particular, that it's Christmas Eve. And if he thinks it's Christmas Eve, I thought it was Christmas Eve. But if it's Christmas Eve, it must have been done more recently because Christmas Eve wasn't Christmas Eve until there was Christmas. You didn't have a Christmas Eve. You had the solstice. So is Mother's Night the night after the solstice? Or what? I don't know. Or is it Mother's Night the night before the first full moon where it sort of really kicks off?
Yeah, well then I'd say at that point it kind of turns into either a time period or what group of people. Because I think some people would,
Exactly. You need to know the culture that's celebrating all the cultures, and then you can get a better grasp of what's going on.
yeah. But I would say it
Hmm.
either. I mean, I'd say it could be both. Actually, I would think I'd imagine the full moon because if you're devoting one day to the underworld, then that'd be the winter solstice, and that'd probably be the whole of your ancestry.
Hmm.
And then the full moon, since it's typically
Afterwards,
seen
where
as
you all started, yeah, because you're starting the new year. In the days are getting lighter, things are being born. You would associate with a mother in a way.
yeah. So that would make sense, but maybe it could be the full moon during that time
Hmm.
because you're not just talking about, unless there was a separate thing where the summer solstice would be a father's night kind of thing because the sun's typically seen as masculine, and then the mother's night would be
Yes, more to
winter
do with the
solstice.
moon. Yes, and yeah, the full moon. Yeah, that makes sense. Or when there was no moon, new moon.
Yeah, because I'd picture either it would have something to do with the lunar cycle that month,
Hmm. Yeah, I
and
would say it's got to have something to do with the moon. And that month would make sense post solstice.
yeah, and then I'd imagine that the because if you have one day devoted to your ancestors, then that's going to be your ancestors' night.
Yes. Yeah.
So it could
Yes.
be, yeah. So then after it would make sense if you're going to devote that moon to Mother's Night unless at that point there'd be a proper Father's Night or Father's Day, um, which could have happened in June, as as people typically
Summer solstice.
celebrate.
Yes.
So we put a lot of
Hmm.
emphasis into the Mother's Night and the solstice, but have we really looked into
For the
the
Father's Day.
history
Yeah.
of
So
Father's Day?
every other day was Father's Day. That's what people would say. So,
What is there something we're missing now?
yeah. Uh, modeling. Oh, so Bede writes about it. That's how we know about it.
Okay.
And
So I will still stick with though that this would have been Mother's Night.
and they say Christmas in the Bede says basically, if this is to believe that the Christmas night was Mother's Night.
That Christmas night.
Now they say that can't be the case because
Well, that does
and
seem like the most motherly thing. Decorate the house, dry the stockings, and leave
yeah,
toys up
but it
for children.
wouldn't be on Christmas Day because Christmas Day didn't exist
Yeah.
to the pagans. They didn't
Well,
have a calendar like that. Yeah,
to pagan.
so they would have done it via moons. So they would have had solstice, and then perhaps the day after solstice would have been Mother's Night, or the last day of solstice was Mother's Night. 'Cause solstice is like 2 nights, isn't it? Where they're the same 3 days. So maybe that the third day of that, which could have theoretically fallen on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, then became Mother's Night, and that's how Bede translated it.
Okay. That's definitely some food for thought right there.
Indeed, yes. No, but I will look into that and say someone did mention it to me, and it's on my to-do list.
Yeah, could it be 3 nights? Could it be the one night? Or could it be the one night and the full moon night? Or the
Yep.
one night and the new moon night?
Yes, or the night just after the longest night.
Yeah. Then you just mix in some Julian to Gregorian calendar nonsense. You have
Yes, which is
Christmas.
then applies to, yeah. Although the calendar wasn't there then, was it? Because when Bede talks about Christmas, he must be talking about the 6th of January. Or has a Julian calendar? No, Julian calendar hasn't come in then, has it? So Bede's Christmas was January, yeah?
If you're talking about the Julian calendar, yeah. So Epiphany, Orthodox Christmas.
Yeah, the Christmas was the 6th of January until a point in time. At that point in time, couldn't have been till after the Julian calendar is introduced. And if the dates were like the Julian calendar in the 1500s, although I feel that's a bit late, then Bede, when he talks about Christmas, isn't talking about the 25th of December. He's talking about January, 6th of January, which would make it align with Yule a lot more than Christmas.
Okay.
I don't know. I'll investigate. And maybe
Yeah.
next Christmas, if we talk, and I hope we do, well, I hope we talk a lot more before then, but if we talk next Christmas, I'll have answers for you and we can talk
Yeah. Maybe
Mother's
we can
Night.
gather for every full moon before then.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because I feel like this sort of divulges into trying to play a game of darts, but you have multiple targets that are moving.
Yes, you don't know the numbers of the board. The board is there, but all the numbers are covered and randomized.
Yeah.
So it's just
And they're moving too.
and they're moving as well. Okay, the ball is spinning as well as you not don't know what the numbers are. Yes,
Yeah. Some
it
are
is.
horizontal, some are vertical, some are going in a circle.
Blimey, yes. So yeah, that's what I do like is like uncovering when we've got some real data, real evidence on what people are thinking about dates at the time, and very often you find people forget these things when doing their calculations. Things like certain popular websites, whatever. Even on ChatGPT, isn't clever enough necessarily to work out that there's shifting calendars. So you have to
Yeah.
be really careful on that. And then I'm trying to use AI a little more myself for research. Just to not to write my stuff because that would be absolutely terrible. It would come out awful. But to give me a head start with research, and
Yeah.
I'm getting some really interesting answers. And if you tell the models not to hallucinate, they say, I have not been trained on this data. And that is a really big problem. If you want to leverage AI for your research and the AI hasn't trained on the data, at least it's been honest. But I think my role isn't going to get overtaken by AI for a few years yet.
Oh, it's going to be a long time before we can look at AI seriously taking over the place of an academic.
Yes,
A lot
yes.
of
I mean, it,
a lot of information concepts from all that, data gathering. Um, really, yeah,
exactly. Well, many books I've got, I have my own personal library purely because you can't get those books online. So
yeah,
you have to, they're not digitized. So if they're not digitized, how does an AI know what's in them?
yeah. And how does it understand the linguistical concepts of
Exactly. The difference between
language?
interpretation and translation of foreign texts as well, and all sorts. Yeah, and I've got books here that, just so difficult to get hold of.
Yeah, and then they
So,
write, and there's things written um, in something like, when you see something in a text and they're talking about someone kicking a plow, is this a metaphor?
exactly.
Is this a religious action? Is this just literal? Somebody's using a plow.
Exactly. Yeah, interpretation is really key on things. Yes. Yeah, I teach that a lot. When people read texts from other cultures to try and work out what's going on, I always say get at least three versions of a translation if you can, because people will interpret things differently, and then you're in a better position. And I've got about 15 copies of the Poetic Edda, all of them different. And it says, how can someone translate the same sentence 15 different ways?
Yeah, and
But
then
people
to
do it.
our modern day very scientific language,
Hmm.
which is still to me a very hard concept over the last like 3, 4 years to try and wrap my head around that. These people who wrote these myths lived in a world of your senses and the concept of microorganisms and electrical conduits, um, and the whole idea that nature, God, and science was all one thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Science was nature. Explaining nature was science. Yeah. Yeah. However you explained it. I mean, yeah, it's strange, and I try to explain to people as well myths. So I run the mythology and folklore database, which is used for research. And I have to explain to people that the myths, why, or the motifs of myths, why we've categorized myths in these motifs. We've done that. That doesn't mean the myths, when they were written, were meant to be about the motifs we put them in. We have just decided, oh, that's a myth about a woman turning into a fish, or a man turning into a dog, or whatever the motif is. But actually, the person who wrote it may not have been the motif of the myth. It may have been something completely different. We just categorize it. It's almost we've created a whole myth of categorizing myths, which is sort of ironic. Yes, and but whilst there are cons to the death of the oral tradition, there are pros that once you've written something down, then at least it's not going to change so much. But then people then forget what oral tradition is, and then say, well, oral tradition must have changed a lot because it wasn't written down. Because they forget how the art of oral tradition and how it probably didn't change much, and there were reasons why it didn't change much. There was an incentive to keep the story, to tell the story, and people don't realise that.
Yeah,
So,
because I mean, you look at South America, Ed Barnhart talked about this in his interview.
hmm,
Mayan writings existed for like 7,000, you're looking at like a 7,000 year or however many thousands of years changes. And there's certain points there was the middle period of classic Maya, and the moon goddess almost doesn't exist in writings. She rarely ever shows up, but she suddenly becomes very prevalent in the late classic period. So that's a pretty mind-boggling thing to try and understand. Like, how is it that the culture
Why things
changes so
change
much,
yeah.
even with writing?
Yeah, even with yeah, well, you see that with the church. The church has changed so much, from the Old Testament to the New Testament. That's quite a change. And
Yeah,
from the New Testament to the Quran, that's again quite a change. The Old Testament's fascinating. I think that's an incredibly interesting book and
very, very, very,
very useful.
especially in, yeah,
But yes, it did. Yeah, but in terms of it's yeah, I know I love it. It's like it's almost like a well, I say Genesis or the first half of Genesis is like a best of mythology. Um, for me, you read it and it's just like, but it also explains really well how the Judaism borrowed myths from many other cultures,
yeah,
myths that are far older than Judaism.
yeah,
So then the
there, yeah.
question is,
And,
if you borrow a myth of another culture
oh,
and make it your own, can it still be sacred?
that is a good
They're
question.
reasonably comfortable. I don't think Cyrus the Great, for example, told people to stop worshipping, stop being Judaism. And in fact, Judaism picked up some of the beliefs of um, the Iranians, Persians, such as the concept of hell suddenly turns up post Cyrus the Great conquering Israel. Uh, the stories before that, hell doesn't exist, and then post Zoroastrian influence, hell suddenly exists. Is that God forgot to tell the people, or they've been influenced from another culture?
Yeah,
Um,
that's the part um that's the age-old debate. It's like, did they was it forced on was it forced on them? Was it not?
no, I think they just took it. I mean, you see that quite a lot where cultures are uh, influenced by cultures that seem to be better than them, so they take the best bits of that culture.
Mhm.
What has their got that we haven't to be so powerful? We'll have some of that because our God must have that. We just didn't realize.
Yeah. Yeah, were they did they just think it was a great idea? That's another thing. Uh,
Mm.
and were they cool with it? With that?
I think they were cool. Well, they understood it. And you see that in the Romans and the Greeks and that everybody seemed to be okay with everyone else's religion because they almost considered all gods sort of equivalent. If everybody was worshipping the same sort of gods, and so they were probably the same god in a different name.
Or you had people that were Roman who converted to different religions.
Exactly. Mithricism and you had all that there as
Actually, I
well.
do remember in a documentary on the female gladiators in your neck of the woods over in Britain. Um, there were some of the female gladiators that had converted over to from Roman religion to Egyptian religion.
Okay, yeah. So there was a bit of Egyptian religion there because some of the Roman armies took an Egyptian priests and priestesses with them on battles to help, affect the weather and the like. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
very, very probable. Yes.
yeah, and then in Samaria or uh, Babylon and Mesopotamia, um, Greeks would go there for education, and when they would, it's pre-Christian Greece, and they would adopt ideas from them.
Makes sense. Yeah. So we see that. We see people getting influenced
Yeah.
by other cultures, where they see better things going on. That's the nature of humanity, I think. Why not? Why not? If it's a good idea, if you think you're going to become prosperous and well off and more successful, then you do it.
Mhm. I'm like, hey, I think this is a good update for my religion.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, because I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
'cause
that is why religions are man made,
yeah,
because
um,
that's a literal example of man making religion. Yeah.
man
Just
making
in
a
it.
religion.
Mm.
But is it? Yeah, but were they? That's that thought. But the thought I have is, it's like, did they look at religion with a set of eyes no differently than um, somebody adding like decorations to their home or using technology or
Well, you have to understand that the way I look at it is that it was that whilst these things were added to religion, it wasn't like the people thought, oh, that's a good idea, we'll add it to religion. It would have been one or two influential priests who saw the idea and added it to religion. And if you think of it like that, because that's the only way that could work, you can't get a whole population to suddenly change on one day to think of something. It has to be seeded and thought. So, I mean, that's how I would see that being influenced. And if that is the case, then in terms of the individual thought, then yes, I think it may well have been, oh, this is a great way to manipulate this religion. Unless those, but I come from a cynical world of no religious belief. So I look at it like it's like a Christmas tree you add baubles to. And if those priests really believed that there was a God and really believed all these superstitious things or whatever you want, religious things going on, then perhaps they really thought it was something they had missed and added to. But to me, I like the bauble on a Christmas tree idea as an analogy. It was just adding something to make it better, adding another blade to a Swiss Army penknife sort of thing. But these are the things that make it interesting and make people want to believe. And you partially believe and you see something like this was his crypt, then you makes you believe more and what and it helps maintain the story people want to hear about it.
for some people, yes, but I remember watching a documentary with there's two priests in it that were brought to this crypt. So that could have very well been. I remember one was like, this is very interesting. Like he's very captivated by it. And the other one, what was like gone in complete denial over it. He's like, no, there's no crypt. You're never going to find evidence of Jesus.
Hmm,
Like he
exactly, yeah.
completely lost his mind over it.
Or
And
maybe just annoyed that people are trying to commercially benefit maybe off these things.
it could be, or, it could be the uh, foolishness of the dangers of blind faith. People don't, who don't
Question.
question. And,
Exactly.
um, I mean, which is funny because
I think religion relies on
Jesus
that a lot.
said so much about question.
Exactly.
Ask questions, question your leaders, question your books. There's Jesuits everywhere.
Mm.
He talked so much about the hypocrisy, and yet this is literally the full circle debate we're still having on it to this day,
Mm.
is how much people don't question.
And here we have we've created Father Christmas now to supersede him in the coming centuries. Who knows? 2,500, it'd be the Church of Father Christmas.
Yeah. Or who knows, maybe he was just the face of a play character that was supposed to bring merriment and somehow got adopted later
Yes.
on.
Yeah. I like religion. It's a fascinating subject, and it gives
It,
me myth, so that's why I love it.
yeah, it is an extremely interesting thing to talk about. It's my favorite. In all of history, it's my personal favorite.
Yes, I can tell until you're really interested and you've read a lot. That's good. It's an
Yeah,
interesting conversation, Gary. Very
interesting
interesting.
conversation, and it makes very interesting script material as well.
Mm.
All right, John, I think this is a good way for us to end 2024.
Okay. It's been a brilliant year, Garrett. It's been great to talk to you on multiple occasions, and I'm sure we will talk many times more. And who knows, maybe even see each other next year.
Maybe even see each other.
Or if you do, I'll vlog it. Yes.
We'll make our the Bard's Archive could make its first vlog.
Yes, exactly.
Talking myths in London with Crecganford. All
Yes.
right, I'm up for
Okay.
that one.
Take care, Garrett. Have a happy new year and a happy new year to everyone who's watching.
All right, Happy New
Take
Year,
care.
everyone. Happy New Year to you too, John.